Okay, so the next thing that we want to do to look more like Jesus is worship him daily. Now, worship should never, ever be reserved for church only, right?
I agree.
No.
Because at church we have it together. I mean,
well,
no.
I try to. Not every time.
No, like I'm saying, you come in, you see your people like, hey,
Yeah.
especially people that you're not really close with, they don't know. You're like, hey, are you having a good day? Yes, fine. So you have it together. At home is where you feel like it's messy, so you should definitely have worship.
At home. You know, and when we worship him by ourselves, like, okay, I'm not saying don't worship him, don't enter in a church. Like, yes, do all of that. It's a great thing. But when we worship him by ourselves and no one's here, it's like a next level experience, don't you think?
Oh, yes.
I mean, like, it's intimate. You know, it's like a married couple. Like, if you're going to be intimate with your spouse, you do that behind a closed door.
Yes.
And that's where you learn things about each other. That's where life can be formed. And some people are like, I'm not having any creative ideas, or God's not talking to me. Close that door, man.
I agree.
Go close the door. Worship him intimately. You'll learn things about him that you didn't learn other places. You're going to get to learn things about yourself because he'll show you things. And then you can get pregnant with spiritual ideas and creativity. New doors opened.
That's actually a good way to explain it, because how do you explain that? Especially like when you're having a bad day and you just don't talk to me, and then close your door and you just like fall on your knees. You're like, God, I don't know where this is going, or where, like, because you know, there's always a solution. You feel like there's always a solution to something, but when you finally hit rock bottom, where you're just like,
yeah.
Okay, so there's no way to get out. So just go and close your door and cry it out and worship. Turn on that music. Open your Bible. I've noticed that whenever you just lay it down, Jesus, when you're by yourself and you're a hot mess, and after you leave that worship, you're just like, that's what I needed. I just needed time with Jesus.
Right. Has there ever been a time like that, you know, specifically, like, man, a worship moment really changed your life?
Last week.
Okay, tell me about
So
it.
you know how we're having those prayer weeks, prayer days here. I remember leaving work. It was just one of those days where I was just like, oh, it was just, everything was heavy on my back. It was just, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And I was like, you know, nobody shows up to prayer till like after like 6:15 or whatever. It was like 5:45. So I was like, I'm gonna go to church. I mean, you do it at your house, but I just needed, not for my kids.
Yeah.
I just needed myself. So I was like, oh, I get the church a little bit to myself. I show up. Brother Dwayne was here. I was all great. He saw me. He's all, you okay? I'm
You're like, leave.
And then Marcus shows up. I'm all great. And I was like, I just ended like, okay. So I just went to the front. Marcus turned on some music for me. I just let it all out. And it was just like, after I left, I'm all, like, it's just like all these rocks and backpack were holding you. And in the moment you gave it to God, it was just like, I'm flying again. And it's just, it's just, I felt relieved. I don't know. Now that I think about it, what was I crying about?
Well, that's just the thing. Like when we worship, we're really like focusing in on him, and so all the problems of the world can like eclipse in his glory, because we're with our Maker. You know, in Psalms 22:3 tells us that God inhabits. That means he's there. He dwells in the presence of his people. So when we're worshiping him, we're being infused with his presence. And then 2 Corinthians 3:17 says, "But where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom." I know for me, one time, we had just moved to the Panhandle, and my life was a total mess. Like, total mess. It was bad, really, really bad. Had a lot of like family trauma going on, and just a lot of uncertainty. And we were having a worship night, and during praise and worship, I just heard God speak to me, and he's like, hey, Pastor Teresa is going to ask you to be the youth pastor. And I'm like, there's no way. Like, for me, I was like, that's not the Holy Spirit, because one, my life is like crazy right now. Like, who would want to put me like in a leadership position like that? Two, that's like at the time, that was like my biggest goal, dream come true. And I'm like, so that's just like me thinking that. And then three, our church had like amazing youth pastors. Like, why would that be, you know? So I was like, that can't be right. And he's just like, you know, just trust me. Like, you you know, you're not in your flesh right now. You're looking at me, and I'm like, oh, we'll see what happens. And I don't remember how long it was, a couple weeks, maybe a month or two later after that, they get up and announce in the church that they're leaving to Ireland. And I was like, interesting. Like, we're not going to have these bad, but I'm just like,
Okay.
And so then, sure enough, like at that time I worked here at the church upstairs in the office, and they come in and they talk to me about it, and I was like, yes. And so I did. Well, so we would have the teenagers come over to our apartment, and I hated my apartment. It was like terrible, like small roaches, all the bad things. It was just like terrible. And I, during praise and worship, one night heard God say, like, I need you to believe me for a better house. And I was like, I can't be God. And he was like, isn't that terrible? We always question like the good things.
Like, this is just my feelings, wanting everything better and being selfish.
Yeah, and I was like, that can't be. And the more that I worshipped him, he was like, and just beholding him and his goodness, he's like, you preach that I'm good. What are you showing them? Mm-hmm. They know that you hate this apartment, I need you to believe this. And I was like, I don't know. And it's so bad. I feel so embarrassed, but I didn't have the faith to like believe that was God talking. So a few weeks later, I'm at another worship service, and somebody comes over to me. And so they heard God talking during praise and worship, and they're like, God gave me a word for you, that he says he wants to make your life a billboard to the youth, but you're not letting him. I was like, it's all like Donkey Kong.
Isn't it where it is whenever we hear God speak to herself, like, wait, we doubt, but then when somebody else comes, like, okay, that was you, and he's all, I've been telling you this.
Right.
Why did you have to hear it from somewhere else?
Yeah. So the point is, when we're worshiping God, he inhabits our praises, and where the Spirit of God is, there's liberty. And so we can become free to believe him at his word, so that we're not walking in fear and anxiety. And it's so much easier to hear his voice because we're focused.
Yes.
We're like giving him our attention. So make a decision to worship him intentionally, not be thinking about what you have to do, because that's a ploy by the enemy. We'll like start worshiping, and then it's like, I need to do this.
Oh, we should wait to church Sunday.
Yeah.
It's barely Wednesday.
Yeah. Don't be a Martha. Let's be a Mary. Let's be intentional about it. And remember, like if you need freedom from like shame, anxiety, fear, guilt, whatever, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty, and he inhabits the praise of his people. So go set an alarm on your phone, something. Make a decision to worship him daily, so that you can get free of this stuff and look more like Jesus.